Hey everyone, my name's Amrita. I'm a therapist and I've been studying human behavior for well over a decade now. Today, I want to talk about the psychology of everything that we're finding out in the Epstein files. First and foremost, extreme power creates enabling conditions for exploitive behavior. So it's not so much about their sexual attraction to children or vulnerable populations, but more so how those populations represent an extreme level of authority and control. Core mechanism for what's going on. You ever watch the game Squid Games and the rich ultra elite needed some very extreme conditions to get their jollies, to get entertained? Well, basically, this is called hedonic adaptation. It's a slow tolerance for what tickles your fancy, so to speak, or checks off your boxes of happiness or enjoyment. So, originally, when someone's on the rise, on the climb, they will use anything that satiates their need for power and control. And we'll talk about why that's there to begin with, in a kind of realm of normalcy. As they begin to grow and to be able to satiate their needs with all their accumulated wealth, that threshold for what stimulates them and satiates their twisted needs just keeps growing higher and higher until it reaches that perverse, very taboo territory. Eventually, what once stimulated no longer stimulates, what once was shocking becomes baseline, and what was once forbidden becomes normal. This becomes escalation. They need more shock value, more taboo, more control, more asymmetry. What they use to try to fill their wounds and voids and incongruities, whatever that toxic original fuel source for what made them become successful and wealthy and affluent, was something very jaded and dark and unhealthy. So that starts to need to be fed. And year per year, decade per decade, they begin to feed it in more and more outrageous ways. Here's where it becomes disturbing. Pleasure becomes about mastery, arousal becomes about control, attraction becomes about violation of limits. Sexual behavior becomes instrumental. It's not relational. It's the instrument for which they are able to reach those deep, dark places in their psyche, those places that are really yearning and wanting the extreme control and mastery and violation of limits. This is where the question of why children can become explained, not justified, but explained. It represents extreme authority. It represents the biggest power differential that could possibly be there and total dominance due to the fact that they are children and these are adults. There's limited credibility if they report. There's minimal opportunity to escape or have any authority or power in the dynamic. And this is what individuals who are mentally ill in this manner really are magnetically drawn towards, because it gives them that feeling of ultimate mastery and control. The people that we're learning about in this disturbing manner usually have common traits. They usually have some sort of narcissistic injury. They have chronic voids and emptiness. They're not able to regulate their emotions. There's two things that most of these individuals usually have, and that's elements of narcissism, where they only really care about themselves and they don't care who they harm in trying to please themselves. And they also have antisocial personality traits, which means they don't really care for humankind in the way that the average person would. In fact, they like to harm or degrade society in one way or another. And this is usually to test their desire for invulnerability and to confirm omnipotence. They want to be all powerful and have full control in their behaviors that they engage in. If you combine enabling environments, no pushback, a lot of yes men all around you, as the rich usually do, and you have those original, deep, disturbing wounds, and then you have the need for power, this creates the perfect storm for the behavior to escalate, as I mentioned. Eventually land in a space where they need the highest taboo combined with the element of secrecy and exploitation to have their reward system activated. So their reward system started off in some sort of wrongdoing, because sometimes successful people don't get successful unless they abandon or betray or climb on top of someone else to get to the higher rung on the ladder. So slowly they are just reinforcing maladaptive behaviors and patterns and tendencies. And if, like I mentioned, you have that original core, very dark, rotten wound, it can land in this space of becoming a PDF. Where does the fellow person who is like-minded and wounded in the same way you are, what happens when you combine those types of individuals together? You have this sense of invincibility, and they all kind of reinforce and feed one another's inner demons. And that level of kind of being invested in a negative manner and enabling one another becomes a huge ingredient to this disgusting recipe. They see that they don't really have legal consequences in other areas of their life. They engage in social mirroring. And so what they're doing becomes really normalized. And that's where kind of like the evil cult idea comes in, because they're really just feeding one another's very bad, toxic behaviors by keeping it a secret, by going without any accountability or consequence. And it's just a really bad snowball effect. Here's the psychology of the people at the very, very top. Usually they have some sort of moral exceptionalism. They feel like the rules don't apply to them. They have entitlement. They dehumanize people because they have had time and time again experiences where others depended on them for money, support, or resource. So they start to get like this superiority complex, and they think they're untouchable, and their morals and empathy dial really goes low, if not was non-existent, if they have sociopathic behaviors to begin with, which is where they enjoy inflicting pain. But what we're seeing here is that it tends to be an escalation in terms of the behaviors, and then a decrease in terms of those internal breaks that tells you, hey, this is wrong, maybe I shouldn't be doing this. That pause, or even being prompted to pause because of empathy, it just gradually disintegrates. The abuse that we're all reading and hearing about really becomes a tool to bind accomplices through secrecy, to test how untouchable they are, and to reinforce that strong need for superiority. So like I mentioned before, there's some traits that are overrepresented in that highest upper class, which is dominance orientation, low empathy, narcissism, and that strong desire for superiority and control. This does not mean that all wealthy and rich people have those traits, but people who already have those traits are more likely to seek out environments where they get to exercise them. Because of the corruption aspect, they get this moral impunity where reputation creates protection, and they never have any consequences. So they feel like they're above the law, and maybe even above just general right and wrong, because time and time again, they get off scot-free with no consequences, even though they're causing harm in different ways over and over throughout their life. So again, the biggest question that all of us have, how can you be sexually attracted to a child? It's not about the sexual attraction. It's about the fact that that group of society represents the highest level of taboo. So it's reaching that dark place in their mind, body, and soul. They also represent the highest level of secrecy because there's credibility gaps, and that strong power differential doesn't allow the predator's own inner wounded child to ever enter the equation, because they have made sure that they are only engaging in these bad, disgusting behaviors with someone who has absolutely no chance of making the predator feel vulnerable or possibly overpowered. This is a systemic issue. There's recruiters, enablers, there's a system of silencing. all this infatuation, this societal infatuation with wealth. It creates protective, enabling environments for this disgusting kind of rotten illness to spread. And that's why it's gone worldwide in terms of who we're finding out was involved, and it's been going on for decades and decades because there's so many contributing factors that have just been feeding this monstrous behavior. Individuals' own childhoods were usually riddled with some sort of childhood trauma, whether it was about abuse, neglect, exploitation, or sexual abuse. And why they go on to abuse children later in life is because it's an exact role reversal of what they endured. So this does not mean that all individuals who have been sexually abused go on to grow up to be predators, but it means when you combine an inability to regulate yourself, a thirst for power and control, childhood trauma, and an enabling environment, this can be the result. So it's very disturbing. We're all getting vicarious trauma through exposure to the Epstein files and everything that's in it. It kind of makes you lose your faith in humankind, but rest assured, most of us are not wired like evil monsters, and it can help to process this vicarious trauma to understand what the heck is going on, what's in their psychology, how did their wiring get so crossed and so contaminated. I hope you found this video helpful. Please do take breaks from reading about the news about this. You can easily become flooded and emotionally burnt out, and we don't want any of that to happen. So if you found this helpful, please do comment and share your thoughts. As usual, thank you all for watching. See you next time.